So, y'all mean to tell me that it doesn't strike you as strange that in New York City, a city with almost 10 million people, 42% of whom identify as white people, 92% of the people incarcerated at Rikers are black or brown?
That doesn't make any goddamn sense.
New York State was not the first state to pass bail reform, but in many ways, when New York State passed landmark bail reform in January 2020, that was the beginning of what became a nationwide war on bail reform. Today, I want to walk you through that history, the most recent attacks by Governor Kathy Hochul, and why and how this impacts the Rikers crisis. But first, let's talk about what New York State is and isn't in terms of bail reform and crime. New York City cannot decide whether or not it wants to masquerade as a progressive utopia or Gotham City, neither of which is true. Despite what they'll have you believe, that New York City is this lawless, crime-ridden city because it's run by feel-good Democrats who won't be tough on crime. Reality is that if you want to make an example out of a city that doesn't invest in policing and mass incarceration, baby, do not look at New York City. Not only is New York City far safer than any Republican rural area per capita, and the majority of all arrests in New York City, as well as nationwide, are for misdemeanors, traffic offenses, and non-violent crime, but 86% of all felony charges in New York City are ultimately dismissed. But not only that, there are 36,000 NYPD officers, and they are given almost $11 billion each year. For context, that's more money than the Ukrainian government gave to the Ukrainian army at the start of their war. And on top of that almost $11 billion in funding that NYPD gets, they're on track to spend almost an additional $1 billion in overtime. And then Rikers gets $800+ million yearly too. And I don't know, maybe you forgot about a little thing like our mayor is also NYPD. But there is a war on bail reform in New York City because all those feel-good Democrats they think are in charge don't seem to think there's a correlation between this being one of the most expensive cities on the fucking planet and crime and homelessness. We've taken on de Blasio. We've taken on former disgraced Governor Cuomo.
Shame, shame, shame.
Who snuck in the first set of rollbacks into an emergency COVID relief package at the start of the pandemic and lockdown. Then resident op Eric Adams when he came through like the Dolores Umbridge ass nigga he is. And now most recently, Governor Kathy Hochul. Hochul wants to remove the least restrictive means standard that judges use when making decisions in bail eligible cases. Bail eligible means cases where they're allowed to set bail. This is the only standard that exists. It requires that judges impose the least restrictive means possible when setting bail conditions to assure a person returns to court. The translation is, you cannot do the most, okay? You can do just enough based on what you know about this person or their record or evidence that they have not returned to court at some other time to make sure that they get back. You can't just look at people and decide based on how you feel and what you think of them and your perceptions. You could decide, oh, they're dangerous or I want to set higher bail. If Hochul gets her way, judges will have no legal standard to base their bail decisions on, meaning the result will be complete arbitrariness. And judges can do whatever they want based on how they feel, which means more black and brown New Yorkers in jail. Governor Hochul is fighting for these bail reform rollbacks despite the fact that she knows that bail reform is not linked to a rise in crime. Now, what do I mean by she knows? I mean she wrote an op-ed in the New York Daily News saying so. And I quote, "Blaming bail reform for the increase in violence that cities across America are facing isn't fair and isn't supported by the data. Doing so risks distracting us from what are likely far more significant factors. Upheaval from the pandemic, the availability of illegal guns, increased gang activity, lower arrest rates, and a backed-up court system, to name a few." So why is Kathy Hochul deciding to join Eric Adams in what she knows is a factually untrue crusade to, one, manufacture a crime wave that the New York Times was careful to wait until after the midterms to finally acknowledge was manufactured, and two, to pin said manufactured crime wave on bail reform? I guess for the same reason that despite being a new governor who was barely elected by the skin of her teeth because of what many believe, and I do share these beliefs, was because she failed to fight the propaganda that was being perpetuated by top cop Adams, and parroted back by her nut-ass right-wing opponent Lee Zeldin, the first thing she decided to do once elected was alienate her whole damn party by digging her heels into nominating LaSalle, an anti-union, anti-choice judge, to the highest court, which failed, by the way. And that reason is?
Let's find out.
I don't know. They must have something on shorty.
Where's my money, man?
But what I do know are the facts about bail reform and why these baseless attacks do nothing but exacerbate the ongoing human rights crisis at Rikers. Everyone's heard about Rikers, yet very few people seem to be aware of the fact that it's a pre-trial detention center, which I do believe is something in and of itself worth noting. Think about that. Rikers has been open since 1932. That's almost a century of torturing Black and brown New Yorkers on a daily basis in a city that at any given time has millions and millions of people. Yet, it was viral news when I, but one gal, told people that it was a pretrial detention center, which really speaks to one central truth. The devil works hard, but propaganda works so much harder. Because normally, awareness of an issue is a good thing, but they've turned Rikers' infamy against it. So people believe it's infamous because it's a super terrible place for super terrible people and not a pretrial detention center that looms as a threat over the heads of any poor New Yorker who could be accused of something as simple as stealing a bear or stealing a backpack. Over 85% of the people incarcerated at Rikers have not been convicted of a crime. They're being held there because they don't have the money to purchase their freedom. And because people can't purchase their freedom and fight their cases from the outside, they're often forced to take pleas and criminal convictions that they otherwise wouldn't have so that they can get out of the hellscape that is Rikers. And I want you to think about that. When the next time you see an article where they're sensationalizing, oh, this person has 64 criminal convictions, think about it happens. That is usually a sign of somebody was homeless or mentally ill and they're being arrested for petty, trivial things, and the court is saying to them, you can plead to the charge now, plead to the charge at arraignment, or we can set bail on you and you'll go to Rikers. And that happens enough time and you end up with this long rap sheet that will be weaponized against you at a later date. But one of the more well-known tragedies at Rikers that in many ways launched a campaign to close it was what happened to Kalief Browder.
Court records show Kalief had attempted suicide at least 6 times, spent 1,110 days behind bars, more than 800 of those in solitary confinement. His court date postponed more than 30 times. He endured all this having never been given a trial, never convicted of a crime. Finally, in June of 2013, all charges against Kalief were dismissed. But his experience exposed a troubled criminal justice system and the brutality of life behind bars.
It's important to remember that what happened to Kalief Browder was not an anomaly. I think about Layleen Polanco, a 27-year-old trans woman who died in Rikers on $500 bail. I think about 24-year-old autistic Izzy Johnson, who died in Rikers on $1 hold. I think about 25-year-old Brandon Rodriguez, who died at Rikers after he was left in a crowded intake pen for days, where he was beaten and then left in a locked shower stall, where he eventually hung himself in that shower stall. And they didn't even tell his mother. They had to find out in a Facebook post. I think about Stephen Kadu, whose mother spoke at a Rikers rally we held last year where she said this.
My name is Lasandra Kadu. Stephen Kadu, who lost his life on the boat, aka the barge, was my son. The boat is an extension of Rikers Island. No mother should go through what I've gone through and still going through. I got a call on September 22nd around 10 o'clock. Another inmate called my daughter screaming that my son was dead. That's how I found out my child was dead. I haven't seen my son in 2 years because of the pandemic. I seen Zoom visits. Last time I seen my son was September 28th. My son turned 24 September 11th. My son died September 22nd, awaiting trial. Everyone there is awaiting trial. They're, like she said, they're not convicted of a crime. They're just waiting, and they shouldn't have to die. We need to decarcerate now before someone else loses their lives. Another mother goes through what I'm going through every day. It's 5 months that I'm waking up without my son, and it's the most hurtful thing that I have to go through. to find out that there was a 16th person yesterday when I thought that I keep going and my son would be the last 12, which it doesn't make sense because there's 16 more. 4 more, it made 16. I'm going through this. Every mother who has a son, again, every mother who has a son in jail, in its jail system, should be outraged. Any human being should be outraged, let alone a mother that's not getting up and speaking. I'm speaking for every person in that building. Every mother, again, should be outraged on the system, on how they treating people. Take action. Do something. Say something. Speak up. Do something.
So in 2019, the campaign to close Rikers emerged, and advocates introduced a plan to shut it down by first reducing the jail's population to 3,300. Because as it stands, Rikers was built to hold a maximum of 3,000 people. Yet there are over 5,000 people being incarcerated at Rikers right now, which is why people are being piled on top of one another, why people are being held and locked in shower stalls, why the inside of Rikers looks like this. Instead, what former Mayor de Blasio agreed to was closing Rikers in exchange for 4 more jails in its place.
Is it crack? Is that what you smoke? Do you smoke crack?
Nonetheless, that's why bail reform was and is essential to decarcerating Rikers so it can eventually be closed. And it's been successful. Nearly 200,000 people who would have otherwise been unable to purchase their freedom have been able to fight their cases from the outside. And a higher percentage of people showed up to their court dates after bail reform was enacted. The failure to pay rate in New York City fell from 15% in 2019 to 9% in 2021 after the enactment of bail reform. Yet, bail reform has been under constant attack. There is a misconception that people have around bail that is perpetuated in the media, and that's that bail has something to do with your safety, or that bail is there to circumvent the entire criminal legal process and punish people for things they've been bare bones accused of. It's not. The legal purpose of bail is to ensure a person returns to court. That's it. The idea behind cash bail, which is a nonsensical one, is that a person is more likely to return to court if they paid for their freedom, which in application means nothing other than rich people can buy their freedom and poor people cannot, which is precisely why over 80% of people arrested nationwide in America made less than $12,000 annually, and over 400,000 of the almost 2 million people incarcerated in this country are being held pre-trial. America preys on the poor. If you let the New York Post, or sadly, even the New York Times tell it, crime is out of control in New York City because the bail laws, people are committing crime nonstop and getting out of jail and just doing it again and again and again.
The lies! There you go, this bitch. I'm telling you.
Bruh, first of all, New York City still has a cash bail system. Mind you, you know who doesn't? New Jersey. New Jersey completely abolished their cash bail system in 2014 under Republican Governor Christie, but notice how you didn't hear a peep about that, huh?
That's suspicious.
And if you're ever released on your own recognizance, one of the conditions of that release is that if you don't get rearrested, because if you do, the judge can set bail on you. So even if you are charged with one of the select offenses that judges are no longer allowed to set bail on in New York City, if they release you and you get rearrested for something else, they can and likely will set bail on you, period. But regardless, 99% of all people, regardless of bail or otherwise pretrial conditions, were not rearrested for any alleged violent felony in New York City since the passing of bail reform. 99%. All New York City bail reform did was make it so that judges could no longer set bail on the first arrest for traffic infractions, violations, most misdemeanors, and non-violent felonies. And on cases where bail could still be set, the prosecutors and the judges have to actually articulate a reason, some kind of proof, reason to believe that that person is not going to return to court without further conditions. And they have to set the least restrictive means to make sure that person returns to court. Meaning, they can't wild out. Guns, violence, murder, any of that other sensationalized shit the New York Post pretends is the majority of crime in New York City, cash bail can and absolutely will be set on you if you do any of that shit. And that's if you're lucky and they don't remand you altogether. So in conclusion, Governor Kathy Hochul is our conch shell of the week, and I suggest she stop around with Eric Adams before she around and don't get reelected. Did y'all know Langston Hughes had a big-ass monkey named Jocko? Yeah, bro. Mans was walking around Harlem with a big-ass monkey named Jocko. Learn something new every day.